All right, our next speaker is a psychotherapist and regression therapist in Claremont, California, and is a lifelong researcher of the crop circle phenomenon. She is one of the leading crop circle researchers and educators and has lectured worldwide in the U.S., England, and other countries. She has lectured at numerous conferences and has been interviewed on many radio programs, film interviews, TV specials, and internet shows. She conducts tours of crop circles in England, so if you want a fantastic vacation, you might want to speak to her afterwards. If you can talk your spouse and kids into, hey, we're going to go schlepping out into the middle of a field and sit in a crop circle and see if that's going to beat out the Disney cruise that they've been talking about. I'm torn, honestly. She has written a book entitled Crop Circles Revealed. She has completed 24 summers of research and personally visited crop circles in England and studying the phenomenon of crop circles worldwide. She is not what we call an armchair researcher. Okay, that's, where you sit on the couch and you think you know everything about this phenomenon. That's okay. That's a good way to learn. But I hope you guys appreciate that the researchers that we're putting in front of you today are obviously not that. They get out, they go out in the woods, they go out in the fields, and they research this phenomenon, and they bring the information to you firsthand. Please give a hearty welcome to Barbara Lamb.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I am really happy to be here talking with you. I was here several years ago, but that time I was talking about another really devoted aspect of my life and my work, and that is hypnotically regressing people to their extraterrestrial encounters. And I've done a tremendous amount of that work, and that's run sort of concurrently in my life with researching and experiencing the crop circle phenomenon. Both of these interests started with me in about 1990. And in relation to the crop circle phenomenon, I went to a big forum in Los Angeles, very similar to this, except that they had many, many more lectures on offer. And I was looking through the little program guide, and I noticed a funny little picture instead of the speaker's picture in part of that catalog. And I thought, what's that? And it was a little design, but it looked kind of strange, nice, but unusual. And then I read the title of that lecture, and it said something like Mysterious Patterns in the Fields of Britain. So I read that, and maybe you've had this experience in your life, I hope you have, where suddenly there's a big burst of light that comes from the inside of you in just one of those change moments. And that happened to me when I saw the little picture and read that title about patterns appearing in the fields of Britain. I think it might have even said mysterious patterns. And I burst with light, and I thought, wow, we're being communicated with from intelligence out there. So I went to that lecture, and see, I'd never heard of crop circles before that moment. And I went to that lecture, and halfway through, I found myself slapping my own knee and saying to myself, okay, that's it, I'm going next summer. I have to check that out. And just at that time, 1990, I was becoming more and more convinced that there was reality to UFOs, which I had never believed in. I always thought it was science fiction before then. So just coming into really seriously considering that there were UFOs and beings in them, and that the beings were visiting some people. They were really having encounters, and it seemed to be an extremely significant phenomenon. So I went to England in 1991 and checked out crop circles, got to meet a lot of the people involved in the phenomenon. One of them is here this weekend, George Wingfield, And whether he realizes it or not, he was very instrumental in my being really inspired and getting into the research about crop circles. And I have been doing it ever since. So every summer, beginning in 1991, I've gone to England and researched as many crop circles as I can. I've been in probably, I've lost track, but maybe 1,300, 1,350 or so crop circles personally. Have had experiences in them, sometimes amazing experiences, like in a few of them, these wonderful out-of-body experiences. Because I, as with so many people who visit them, like to sit down or lie down in a crop circle and then kind of go into a state of meditation or reverie. Sometimes I actually get little verbal messages about the crop circle coming into my head, and sometimes have these out-of-body experiences, but it's always a wonderful experience. And as our introducer said, I do conduct a crop circle tour to England. We never have more than 18 people. This year I think we'll have 16. And we go into several crop circles. We go into the center circle at Stonehenge and go into the megalithic stone sites at Avebury. And it's just a lot of fun. It's all outdoors. We stay in a wonderful old farmhouse B&B that began to be built in 1100 AD, with other wings added on in succeeding hundreds of years. And anyway, it's a great adventure. I have a table downstairs, and I'm there sometimes, although I like to hear all the lectures. You can talk to me about that if you'd like to. So now let's focus on the crop circles. For all these years, 24 years, I have given lots and lots of talks to people about crop circles, and I've been focusing almost entirely on the English crop circles, because that's where, as far as we know, most of the crop circles happen all these years, starting in about 1970. Actually, some of the crop circles in England, anyway, go back to the 1800s, and even in one case we know of in the 1600s. So it's not a really new phenomenon. But I think a significant thing is that in the 1980s, when Colin Andrews and Pat Delgado and then Busty Taylor, the pilot, were starting to really pay attention to the simple singular crop circles that were appearing in southwest England, and they drew some people's attention to it. And the more people became aware and interested in the crop circles, it certainly seemed like the more crop circles were appearing. And this is true of other countries. I have eventually come to realize that when there are people in Holland or Germany or wherever there are more crop circles, not more than England ever, but more than there had been, when people there, even just a few people, are really, really interested in the crop circle phenomenon, that country then has more crop circles appearing in it. I think that that's part of the interactive effect that I appreciate so much. Interactive effect with the consciousness, the beings, the intelligence that is out there. At least we think of it as being out there. And that seem to have so much, in fact, everything, to do with the making of genuine crop circles. So I'd like to mention some features of what we call the genuine crop circles. And that's kind of a big deal for those of us interested in crop circles, because there's always this sort of question that comes up. Is this crop circle a genuine one made by the mysterious anomalous source, or is it a man-made or hoaxed crop circle? So every time some of us researchers go into a new crop circle, we're looking for little signs and features that will help us to determine if this one was made by men or if it's one of the genuine ones. So there are quite a few features that happen in the genuine ones, the mysteriously made ones. For instance, they contain complex physical and electromagnetic anomalies. And those cannot be reproduced by human beings. There are so many anomalies that happen in these real crop circles, the genuine ones, that very often, because of the energies are very strong in them, they cause batteries to drain, so that all kinds of electronic equipment has failed in many of these crop circles. They cause compasses to swirl around like mad, swirl around one direction and then the other, and then the other, and then they settle, the little pointer settles, usually off true north. They are affected by the energies. And then, of course, the energies in these crop circles affect the movement of dowsing rods and pendulums. The energies in them cause magnetic changes, and this can be detected by scientific instrumentation, such as magnetometers. And they cause electrostatic changes, and they can be seen and measured in electronic voltmeters. So sometimes you see people going around with a little handheld instrument and the dials are moving or the numbers are changing, and they are measuring the energies in these crop circles. Now, when this instrumentation is taken into a man-made crop circle, there's nothing that happens. The dials, the numbers stay exactly the same because there is not any increase of any of these energies. And sometimes we can detect microwave energy in these genuine phenomenons, although the microwave effects last very, very shortly, very brief. In fact, if you can get into a crop circle within the first few minutes of its having been made, then you could use a microwave detector, but that seems to fade out very quickly. And then there are soil changes that happen in these genuine ones. Sometimes we notice that inside a crop circle as compared to outside a crop circle, the soil looks like it's been especially baked and hardened. And it has a different consistency, and that's all from the making of a crop circle in the genuine way. And then sometimes we find iron particles in the plants that have been laid down in a crop circle. And we have iron microspheres, in the soil. And sometimes there's overall ironization in the crop circle. And then for the everyday person who doesn't have special instrumentation, there is an increase in energy in most of these genuine crop circles that can be felt. I mean, I have friends who just go in with their hands out like this, and they say, oh, yeah, oh, this one has special energy. And they may go into a man-made one, not knowing at the beginning whether it's man-made or not, and they, I don't feel anything. So it's very interesting to experience those changes. So there's this wonderful little phrase that we've been using for years, that a genuine crop circle has the stalks that are bent but not broken. And also we notice in many of the genuine crop circles that there are changes in the growth nodes. And I will be showing you some pictures of that. Now let's take a little view verbally about the man-made crop circles. Sometimes people, young men, youngish, in England are actually paid by a television program or film company to make a crop circle. So we don't call that a hoaxed one, but there are little teams of men who do go out and make crop circles sometimes. And we used to disparage that back in the early 1990s. Oh, that's terrible, these men are getting out there and messing up the whole field of study of crop circles. But as time has gone on, and I've interviewed some of those people who actually make the crop circles, met them, talked with them at length, some of them, the picture seems to widen. And I've realized over time that sometimes people making crop circles seem to be part of the overall delivery system. You know, just like medications can be delivered through something you rub in your skin or pills or shots or whatever, it's kind of the same way with crop circles, in my point of view, that some of them are made by what we would consider more mysterious phenomenon, and some of them are made by men. And it seems like they're all part of the phenomenon, even somewhat legitimately. For instance, some of these men, whom we would usually call hoaxers, are telepathically directed to go into a certain field to make a crop circle. For instance, there are some men who have been awakened in the middle of the night. They're already crop circle makers. And they don't see anybody there, but they're telepathically instructed to go out to a particular field to wake up their buddies, their mates, as they call them in England, and gather together at that certain field and make a crop circle. And this is in the middle of the night, very dark nights there in the fields of England. And so they will go to the field and they'll start laying down a pattern, and they have no idea, they say, no idea what the pattern will be. They just kind of follow this intuitive receiving of direction and messages, and they just go about their business like they would if they knew what the pattern was that they were going to make. And they just go ahead it, and then they finish at a certain point, and they cannot see really what they've done, because sometimes at best there's a little bit of night light, but there are no street lights around, or house lights, or building lights, traffic lights, or anything out in the country where these fields are. So they won't know what the pattern is until they go home and sleep for a while and come back the next day and say, oh, that's the pattern we made. Well, that was kind of nice. So they also claim, some of these men, that there are anomalies that happen when they're out there in the field, whether they're making a pattern they don't even know about, as I just mentioned, or whether they have a particular design that they want to lay down as a crop circle. So they will experience things like sometimes mysterious balls of light in the fields. One of these men said that he was there laying down a crop circle, and one of the ones where they didn't know what the pattern was going to be. And then suddenly this bright white glowing ball of light was seen at the edge of where they were doing the crop circle, and it came slowly toward him, and he felt a lot of heat and energy from it, and so he just dropped his equipment and ran out the tractor track to the side of the field, because he didn't know what was going to happen if it actually reached him. He thought he might be harmed. And then there was another man who was out with a small team of these people, and they were making a crop circle, and this one guy was talking to what looked like a man several feet in front of him, and he was talking with him. He didn't really hear back from him, but he was talking to him about what they were doing, and he assumed that the rest of his little team was behind him. Everything seemed normal. And then eventually he looked around to talk to his friends who were making another part of the crop circle, and he realized that they were all there behind him. So who was this guy in front of him? And when he looked around again to see this person, that person had vanished. So what was that all about? That's one of those anomalous things. So many things like that happen, and we can't exactly explain them. So signs of a man-made crop circle are that the stalks that are laid down they usually are bent over just an inch, half an inch or so above ground level. And where they are bent over to make the crop circle pattern, they get broken. And therefore they lose their connection to their roots. We're talking about every stalk in a crop circle. If it's man-made, they break, and they lose a connection with the roots. And so they die. They die right away. And even if you go in a day or two later, you notice that these plants just kind of look really flattened, kind of squashed, and they're dead. They have no more luster compared to the standing stalks around them. Dead and flat, uninteresting. And some of them, many of these stalks that have been laid down show little scrape marks that look like little white marks going across the stalks where they've been stomped down with stomping boards or even garden rollers in some cases. And they have absolutely no anomalies happening to those plants. No bent nodes, no swollen nodes, which I will show you pictures of. And they have no energy. You just go into one and you feel, just sort of flat, dead, lifeless. And of course the plants have all died. And sometimes if it's a damp night or if it's rainy, there will be muddy footprints around in the crop circle and around it, leading up to it. So that's very different than the genuine ones. So I'm going to just begin now with showing some pictures. Through the years, even though concentrating very, very much on the English crop circles, I have been aware, you can't help it, that more and more have been appearing all over the world. And that's been happening since I was first aware of it in 1991. In fact, in that year, which was the very year in September when these two elderly men came forward and said, "We have made all the crop circles." And there were 23 countries in that 1 year where crop circles were happening. And these two men, they were in their 70s, and they claimed to make all the crop circles. Now, there was no way that these two men in one night could get to about 4 different places in England and Germany and Holland and other places, even Australia, and make the crop circles. So that was a hoax, that the phenomenon was hoaxed, if you see what I mean. And then that was all traced back to the fact that these two men had been paid a sum by the Ministry of Defense in England to make a big splash, which went all over the world by the United Press, a big splash that they had conned the world and they were responsible for the crop circles. And as I say, that was a hoax, that they had hoaxed them. So anyway, let's get on. There we go. It's always rewarding when the technology works. I'm always That's the part I get the most scared about in giving a talk, is that, what if the technology doesn't work? Okay, in Germany, 1991, a really amazing thing happened. And that there was this crop circle, quite a long one, near one of the ancient sacred sites in Germany, Grosdorf, near Hildesheim. And it came in several different pieces of it in this pattern. And the amazing thing is that eventually people began to really research that crop circle, and they found here and here and here that a plate like this with the same basic pattern on it was found in the ground under those spots. One of these was mostly gold, the percentage of the makeup of the plate, which was about a foot in diameter and, an inch and a half or so thick. And that plate had the same pattern on it that was found in the crop circle. And the other one was silver amalgam, large percentage of silver. And the other plate found with the same pattern on it was more of a bronze amalgam. And so I don't think, as far as I know, that anybody ever found out how that happened. You know, how those plates got there, where the plates came from, and why they were the same pattern exactly as that crop circle. So Germany has had many, many crop circles. And I think that that's a wonderful example of how when somebody in a country, in this case Germany, becomes extremely interested in and dedicated to the crop circle phenomenon, that then that country that the person comes from starts receiving more and more crop circles. I think that intelligence is paying attention to the people who go into the crop circles and are very, very interested in them, and in a sense thinks, oh, good, we have a receptive audience. People are caring, people are paying attention, and then they make more crop circles in that country. So in Germany, starting around 1990 or so, wonderful man, young man, older teenager, in fact, Andreas Müller, came to England every summer. And he was totally dedicated. He came from Germany. And then afterwards, after the summer, he would return to Germany and live his life there. And so Germany became, receiving more and more crop circles. Andreas, in fact, would drive around every morning early, as soon as there was daylight, and find out where there was a new crop circle and kind of pass the word around through those of us who were there for that purpose. And then we would know where to go to see a brand new crop circle. And he would measure them and draw diagrams. I saw him in many fields with a long tape measure and documenting it all, as the Germans often do very wonderfully and meticulously. So Germany has had its share, definitely, of crop circles, some more simple, such as this, and they get more complex. I'm putting these slightly out of order in terms of the year, but just to give you a sampling. And this one too is interesting because it has the straight lines and the squares in its pattern. And this one, now we've got the wiggly lines. And very often crop circles have an extra little feature such as this. Sometimes they're absolutely round, and sometimes they have a little bit more variation of shape to them. And then this one, we've got the straight lines and the squiggly lines and the extra little features as well. And then this one. So you can just see, just from this little sampling so far, that there's tremendous variation in the crop circle patterns. And that's true wherever these patterns happen. And then this one, whoops, I just want to go back to that. Yeah, so we've got these straight edge corners as well as the curves and the flattened down areas. This one, the bright yellow crop, is very significant. It's the oilseed canola crop. And they bloom with these gorgeous yellow blossoms in the springtime. It's usually the first crop, along with barley crops in the spring, that are growing tall enough by April or more likely May, so that crop circles are worthwhile to lay down in them. And the oilseed canola crops are very thick. Each stalk is very thick, finger thick or more, and they're also very, very brittle. So if you were to take a fresh canola stalk and try to bend it, it wouldn't bend. It would crack, it would splinter, it would fracture. So it's particularly significant that when these stalks have been bent and laid down at ground level, that they are just bent over smoothly by this mysterious energy or whatever it is that lays down the genuine crop circles. And the blossoms that have been, the blossoms of those stalks that have been laid down in the making of a pattern, they are not squashed or crushed. So there's been nothing physical pressing down as you would have in a man-made crop circle. So Germany is going on, and this pattern is very much like some of the ones that happened in England in 1990 and 1991, these sort of Gaia symbols from very, very ancient times. And it's interesting to me that in Germany they have sometimes the same sort of feature. And this one, look at the complex. We saw a slightly simpler one a minute ago, but all of this patterning, very uneven, and yet it makes an overall pattern. And yet, some of them are so different. Germany again. And this one not only has these very striking, pointed aspects, with the lighter one, always in these pictures, the lighter portion is the part that has been laid down. And look at the edge, a whole patterning, very unusual patterning, that's been laid down in that outer ring. Very, very complex. Now, I cannot figure out how people could have possibly made that sort of pattern. That one really is exquisite. So here's a detail of the same one, and you can see that it wasn't just that they were laid down, these stalks, in this pattern, but they formed this very intricate pattern with the lighter portion being laid down horizontally compared with the ones that were laid down, shall we say, vertically. So that is showing some of the exquisite artwork and texturing in the crop circles. And this one more like a flower blossom. Very interesting, unique, different, and this one again, very different. That's one of the fun things about the crop circle interest, is to see the variety of patterns that are made. And this one, we saw one something like that before, but all different. They're all different from each other. And in 2001, this particular one, which has a very interesting texture, in the laid down part compared to the standing parts, and it almost looks like a rough tweed, definitely really textured. And by the way, it's occurring to me to say that these straight lines that you see in nearly every picture, these are the tractor tracks. And we can tell the size of the crop circles to some extent because the distance between this set of tractor tracks and this one, depending on the farm equipment, which has big arms that stick out, sometimes that's a 20-foot spread. Sometimes with the really big pieces of equipment, that's a 40-foot spread between the ends. So you can kind of get a sense of the size of the crop circle by knowing the size of the tractor tracks. But this is a very attractive one with these perfect little circles nearby around the edge. And this one, again, totally different. Long line, but each one has features in it and little clusters, and these portions, amazing to see. And again, this one, and this was a nice spring crop, probably barley in this case. And the crop circles appear and start nice and green in the spring. It's beautiful, or yellow if it's a canola crop. And then they start, usually by June or so, starting to turn a little bit more tan. And by the time we see many of them, they are completely tan, sort of a light tan heading on into sort of a brownish shade as they mature and are getting ready for harvest. And then this one, again, an amazing difference. Whoops. These little buttons are all too easy to push. So we have a nice laid down circle here with interesting texture, and then this part radiating out. Now, as you see these, they might strike some sort of thought in your mind. It might remind you of something. This certainly appears like something radiating out of something. And someone discovered there was an ancient alchemical symbol of this with the appendages coming out. And then this one, just these wonderful wiggling lines, each one with a little circle. And again, another different one with a beautiful triangle in the middle. And then people say that, some people say that these seem to be representing positions of some of the planetary bodies, our planets, some of them more recognizably than this particular one. And this one is similar in a way to the basic flower of life pattern. The flower of life pattern, even more completely than this one, has appeared a few times in England. And the flower of life pattern represents how all life evolves, how it develops, like from one cell to another, magnifying out into life. And this one, this past summer, very interesting, and it was similar to one that happened a very few years ago in England, where these portions don't quite match, deliberately, I think. And with the one in England that some of us speculated that this seemed like a time warp, a time slippage, perhaps. And it could be that this one signifies something of that. A lot of these crop circles, too, I think, suggest to some extent interdimensionality. And those of us who come to wonderful gatherings like this, I think, are increasingly aware of other dimensions of reality and other dimensional beings, other dimensional intelligences. So I think that all the crop circles, anyway, that are made by the genuine phenomenon are a vehicle of conveying different ideas, different concepts, and perhaps that is one of them. Now, last summer, there was a place in Germany where there were 6 radio telescopes. They go on down the field, and then this lovely crop circle, very nice, neat, accomplished one, happened right near those radio telescopes. And that's quite complex too. As you can see, here are 3 of the radio telescopes in that particular area. A woman walking through the crop, through a tram line, toward one of them. And there have been some outstanding crop circles from England that I will show you when we get to them that were near the big radio telescope there. So radio telescopes have to do with communicating, with hopefully receiving signals from out there in space. And so we were really quite thrilled that the 3 very notable crop circles happened in England, right near the largest radio telescope in all of Europe. And then to see last summer, they had one near a radio telescope was exciting as well, signifying communication, or certainly the attempt to communicate between us and some of those civilizations which we believe are out there. So here's another part of the world. And this one is a very complex pattern, looks rather like Arabic writing or an Arabic symbol, and it did come from one of the Middle Eastern countries. And then also in the Middle East was this interesting formation. People have called it the Aden Stargate warning. This seems to be in a field that's on a high plateau, and then the slope's going down. And that's not actually a crop. But I think because, I'll show you a few of these, patterns that have been carved into the earth, I think that's just as significant as the crop circles. In fact, some of the earth carvings are much larger and even sometimes more complex than the patterns that have been laid down in the crop circles. So I want to talk about the plant changes in these genuine crop circles, whether it's in England, the US, Germany, the Middle East, or wherever else we're going to see samples of crop circles. So one of the things that happens with crop circles, with the genuine energy that comes to them, is that the growth nodes, which is kind of like a knuckle on a finger, the growth nodes get stretched and a bit opened. One of the theories of the making of a genuine crop circle was derived by W.C. Levengood, a noted biophysicist in Michigan, and he was sent thousands and thousands of plants, particularly in the 1990s, from English crop circles and even Dutch crop circles and American crop circles, maybe from some other countries too, but I know about those. And they determined, after studying crop circle plants from genuine ones that had the changes compared with control plants outside of the crop circle in the same field, even just a foot or so away from the crop circles, he and his small team determined that they thought that the crop circles were made by an energy plasma vortex like a cone, invisible probably, of a series of different kinds of plasmas coming down from the higher atmosphere with at least 800 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, so that when the crop circle would come down and hit the crop growing right out of the earth, that those plants didn't get burned or destroyed in any way. So they figured that what must happen, and this is a good theory, and I have to underline theory because we don't really know for sure, but that when the heat would come down in this vortex to a particular spot in the landscape, it would draw up the moisture from under the surface of the soil, which England and some of these other countries have plenty of moisture under the soil. So that would create a steam effect. And that would mean that the plants could just bend over very smoothly, no breaking, cracking, at ground level, and then be pliable enough to lay down or to swirl or to lay down in curves to make these patterns, or even square corners, which I have seen. But without that combination of the heat, the water, the steam, this team of biophysicists didn't see how these patterns could be made. So I think that's a very good theory. Now, another change that happens in the genuine ones is that these growth nodes not only stretch, as I just showed you, but that they open up because the heat inside the stalks is so intense and the plant doesn't get damaged. So it has to release that heat. And the way it releases it is in the growth nodes that they open up and they have holes in the nodes. We call that blown nodes. You know how every field has their own jargon, bent but not broken, blown nodes. They're also called expulsion cavities. And then sometimes the nodes are stretched and bent in a longer way. And then we have a photo here. If you can distinguish, this one comes up and is bent over, and this one. And sometimes the skin, usually the skin, is sort of peeled off the stalks, and the skin may go in other directions. And here is a lovely example of a bent but not broken stalk. So this one has just come out of the roots, out of the ground. Now here, by contrast, is an oilseed canola plant, very brittle, as I said, and it has been bent over by men in a hoaxed crop circle. And so what happens is that they break, they fracture. You can get a sense of how stiff and how brittle that is. But if this were a genuine crop circle detail, we would see them just smoothly bending over. So here's another nice example of a blown node affected by this energy in a crop circle. And in this case, this was a corn crop. They call it maize in England and Germany. But it has actually a knot tied in it. And there were a number of plants in this particular crop circle where there had been a knot. Now, how does that happen? You know, I think even if people tried to do that, it would probably unfurl. But there it is, it stays. Now, the growth rate of plants in a crop circle is really different than a man-made one too, and that's regardless of which country it is. But these studies were done with English crop circle plants, and these plants came from the center of that particular crop circle, or that is the seeds from those plants were planted the next season in a field with control samples. So these seeds came from the center of a genuine crop circle, and these came from closer to the edge of that crop circle. Still had good energy, but not as much, apparently, as the ones from the center. And then here are control plants of the same crop, but taken from outside of the crop circle. This particular researcher did these studies, taking the seeds from each generation of plants and planting them in the next crop, or for the next crop, and he did that for 8 different plantings in succession, and they still had the features, the ones from the center, taller, faster growing, a little bit less at the edge, and control plants as well. So we have a feature in the genuine crop circles called bundling. Here's a group of stalks laid down, and some of the skin seems to wrap around, collecting the stalks in bundles like that. And here we have unbroken ones coming right out of the rocky soil, in this case, laid over at ground level, parallel with the ground, and not broken or fractured in any way. And some more bent nodes. These are not particularly swollen, just a little bit, but they're bent. Normally, stalks, of course, just grow straight up, and that's it. But when these come from a genuine crop circle, you can see the difference. And look at this one. Quite a striking bend, and this one is bent back the opposite direction. So there's a lot of effect of that energy. And in a corn crop, maize, there's another example of a blown node. And then these plants, the little tendril has been swirled around, and these things. So you just know something really quite amazing has happened. Now here is the oilseed canola plant, laid down, that brittle crop, and no breaking. And then you can see that this is all a swirled circle, and that the blossoms are still fully 3-dimensional. They haven't been squashed down by anything. And here's a nice bent stem in that crop circle. The roots, a bent stem, and even this one, really affected by that energy, whatever it is, and misshapen like that. Here's the little part coming up from the ground, a swollen node, and bent over. And some of these crop circles, no matter which country, have wonderful details. I find that it just as interesting as the overall pattern, but the kind of sculptures and the different kinds of centers that they have. So here it is swirled around, and then little tendrils of stalks splaying out to make almost like a spider web sort of design. And I put this in because this is how we used to, and to some extent still do, fly over to take aerial photos of crop circles. And helicopters and microlights are also ways that we go. Now I'm just giving a few of England, a few of the most outstanding crop circles in England. And this one, 1997, the double helix DNA. And we thought this was just wonderful. And these stalks were very nice, showing lots and lots of features of the genuine crop circle. So maybe these beings or this intelligence out there is saying, we are aware of you. We are aware of your DNA. Maybe even we are studying you. And then in England, 2001, this remarkable picture. How would you like to be a little pilot of a very small plane flying over, going about your business, checking out the fields, and then see this face looking up at you? Now, a lot of people have speculated that they, the ubiquitous they, are showing us a picture of ourselves. They're recognizing us. Or maybe they're showing a picture of themselves. Who knows? We can speculate. And some people have said, oh, this reminds me of the face on Mars. But we really don't know, but it's quite a striking thing that appeared. And this was also in a field right next to Europe's largest radio telescope in Hampshire County, England. And so here we have the radio telescope, and then right in the very next field is the face, and several days later, this one appeared, which I will talk about. Many of you are probably aware that in 1974, the SETI program, and Frank Drake in particular, sent out a binary code message to the M13 star cluster, at least it was aimed there, and it gave a message in binary code about us, about like we're introducing ourselves to any intelligence that might live out there. This was the pattern that we sent out, translated into this kind of code, and it was talking about the chemical component of our human bodies, the mineral component, lots of different aspects of our physicality. It shows the double helix DNA that we humans have, and a little depiction of a human man with a larger body and a small head, and the population of the Earth translated into that feature, and then our place in our solar system, the third rock from the sun, and then our transmission system. Instead of the radio telescope shaping up like that, they depicted it like this. Okay, that was 1974. And then in 2001, to our amazement, this pattern appeared in that field near the largest radio telescope that we had. And it seems to be, we can't prove it, but it seems to be a response to what we sent out in 1974. And so here we have slight variations about their mineral components, chemical components, and so forth, different features as compared to ours. One thing that they added that we did not have in our message going out was silicon. Apparently they have a good deal of that in their kind of life. And then their helix, instead of just being a simple double helix, had an extra line in their DNA. And you'll notice that their figure depiction, presumably, of themselves, a larger head compared to ours, and a much smaller body compared to ours, and a different population, a different relationship to their sun, maybe even two suns in their case, and their transmission system. Now, one of the interesting things about their transmission system is that this pattern exactly had appeared the previous year, 2000, in the same field by the radio telescope. And then here it is the next year coming back, and they are showing that what they had already shown in a crop circle pattern was that form of transmission system. So that really got our attention and reinforced that idea that there really is a communication going back and forth between us and some of these other intelligence, at least, who seem to be involved in the making of a crop circle. Well, the next year, 2001, this was perhaps even more striking. The alien head, kind of typical looking, big head, small chin, big eyes, and then this interesting communication disc. Now, I did not go into this crop circle because it happened after I had already gone home again from England that season. But my very dear friend who lives in England and her 2 grown sons heard that there was a new crop circle at Sparsholtz. This was also Hampshire County, England, and they rushed off to it, and they went up one of the tram lines to enter into the crop circle, and they said there was so much energy right there, even just in one line at the edge of the crop circle, that they were almost bowled over physically, and they had to wait. They sat down in the tramway line for about an hour waiting for the energy, because it was very freshly made, to sort of calm down and for them to adjust to it as well. And then they went in and explored it. Now, there had not been an aerial picture taken yet, so they really didn't know from ground level what the whole pattern was. But this was very precise, and they, and I hope other people too, who visited were very careful not to walk on any of the standing spots because they could detect that this was a message. So here is more of a close-up from the air, and it's a binary code message, and that message has been translated by people who can understand that ASCII code. And the code says, beware of false gifts and broken promises. Much pain, but there is still time. Believe that there is still good out there. Went on to say, we oppose deceit. And then it seemed to finish with their saying, conduit closing. So that really meant a lot. And so here we have a depiction of these 2 years of crop circles with the one that came back. Seemed to be a response from our Arecibo telescope message and the face, same year. And then the next year, this one. And here it is again, this message, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception, conduit closing. So you may wonder about the broken promises, the false gifts. I personally think, and many people do, that this is the message from this off-planet intelligence warning us about what's going on here. They're not talking, I don't think, about them deceiving us. We're talking about some of our leaders and our power people, the deceit, the deception, false gifts, broken promises. Doesn't this sound kind of familiar from what we live in here? And I think it's really remarkable that those other beings presumably could recognize this. And then this past summer in England was this crop circle in Morse code, and it spells out no more war. Yay! Good for them. I mean, that is auspicious. So some of these patterns, we can really decipher. Some of them we may not. But in any event, they're beautiful, and I think that they are significant. So here's one in Italy, very beautiful, floral, complex, and this one in Italy, a very simplified form of the flower of life that I mentioned earlier. It seems like we're being reminded, we're being educated about basic things about life and how it forms. And Italy, and near an area called Puarino, very lovely, complex pattern. And it could be that each one of these little patterns, you see the patterns of circles in each larger circle are a little bit different. So if anybody knows what that signifies, I'm always very happy to hear about it. Another pattern in Italy that's very interesting, quite different. And here's that Puarino one again. No, actually it isn't. This is a different one, similar to the Puarino one. Sometimes when they radiate out like this, it's kind of like, ta-da! We want you to notice us. And this one, again, very different. And very thin little lines of circles all the way around the bigger circles. And this is very akin to a Fibonacci spiral, some of which we had happen in England a number of years ago. And this one, again, very different, the pointy stars and little features, little standing sculptures in the wheat, made of the wheat, while the rest of it is laid down very smoothly. We see that in a number of the English crop circles too, these standing sculptures. I was in one at a place called Etchelhampton in 2004, and the sculptures were about this high, 3 or 4 feet high, 6 of them in a center circle of that. And they're all kind of woven and not fallen over, but made into standing sculptures that remain there until harvest time. And here's a picture of that one in the landscape. And then sometimes they're very simple, like this ring in Italy. And then the Netherlands. The Netherlands had 2 wonderful researchers, starting in about 1991, Bert Janssen, Janet Ossebaard, and then eventually a biophysicist from Holland got involved, Elcio Hasselhoff, and started analyzing a lot of the plants from the English crop circles. And there were more and more happening. Because of this interest, I think, my own little theory about it, because there were these Dutch crop circles who were going devotedly for the whole summer every year to England to study the crop circles, and they would take back photos and news and videos to Holland. And as more and more people became interested in Holland, and they published a couple of books there too about English crop circles, so more and more crop circles were given to Holland. It seemed like as the interest in that country increased. More simple, more complex, but look at the evenness of those little circles around the way. And this one, much more complex. And that one, I think, is really lovely, 2007. And you have little diamond shapes as part of that pattern. Very lovely. And here we're back to England again, and this wonderful beam of light. It has been witnessed in Holland and also in England that somebody saw a beam of light coming down into a field, and a crop circle was made right where the beam of light hit the earth. And balls of light are sometimes seen in these crop circles. Either they come out in photographs later, or sometimes they're actually seen there by the naked eye. And this crop circle seems to have had a ball of light in it, flying out of it again. And this sort of blast of light in relation to a crop circle. So back to Holland again. These patterns are really nice, and there is a young man still named Robert van der Broeke. Nancy Talbot has visited with him many, many times, and he is a man who has lots of intuition, or maybe we could say psychic ability, and he can be in his home in one location in Holland, and he gets an intuition that a crop circle is just about to be made in a particular place. And he goes to that place, and either he sees it being made, he's seen it sometimes made by balls of light, or just by like a flash of light over the whole field, concentrated in one particular area more than the others, and there is a new crop circle. One time he went there, reportedly, and he rode his bicycle to the field. He parked it at the edge of the field, and some action of the making of a crop circle was happening out there in the field, and he was knocked over unconscious near the edge of the field. He wasn't harmed, but it shows the power, the might, the effectiveness of whatever that force is that's making a crop circle. He never saw people out there making these crop circles. It was always something anomalous that's difficult for us to describe. So there are a whole bunch of them, different years, many crop circles in Holland, in crops and also in grass, some instances. And this is a beautiful example of a swirled center, just evenly, beautifully swirled around, and that's so true of the crop circles in England, and then the standing crop around that circle. And another one with a beautiful kind of glossy, unstomped on, presumably genuine crop circle just running along like sand in a stream of water flowing by, and a beautiful swirl. And lots of different patterns. Some of them we recognize as Christian crosses or other features. Another one like that. This one was done in grass, tall grass, but forming a beautiful crop circle. And this one in Hoven, Holland, these little arrows are just showing the different directions that part of the crop we're going in. So this is very complex. Here's the whole larger outer portion of the circle. So you can see it isn't just flattened down. There's actually a swirl effect. And very often these centers, have kind of a splaying out. Sometimes they're standing clusters of stalks. They're all different. And this one is so interesting because here's kind of an off-center center, and swirled in this direction, and the standing crop around. And then here's that little tufty, splayed out area near the beginning. Series of circles, rings, small circles, like a figure 8, or maybe the infinity sign. Possibly we had a beautiful infinity sign in 1994 in England. And here again, the swirls showing the direction of the laid down crop. Okay, in Holland, this one, sometimes it's easier to see the whole pattern by a diagram like this. Very precise rings. It's quite a lovely pattern. And rings and an anomaly, light anomaly. Here, the laid down rings. And this one, sorry, this is rather fuzzy, but you can see the complexity of it. Well, this is a wow, but I must say there's a lot of controversy about this one. Some people claim that it was done by a team of people, done in the daytime. It's huge, too. You can tell by the number of tram lines. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of feet long. But other people say, no, that's not true. It just suddenly was there one night and seen. So we really don't know. Some of them, it's very difficult to get the absolute truth, but that is a magnificent one. Now we're going to the US. In this case, outside of Findlay, Washington, way back in 1990. Madison, Tennessee. Nice, complex pattern with even a little triangle in the middle. Louisiana. In some of these states, we haven't had anybody fly over and take photos of them. They're not as organized about that as they seem to be in Germany. And we probably have had many, many more crop circles in America than we even realize, because in a lot of these big Western and Midwestern states where we have enormous crops, anybody flying over to do fertilizing or dusting or whatever, they have no idea whom to report them to. And a lot of our fields, too, are on huge flat territories, so you could easily drive by one part of the field and never know that there's a crop circle out there, because they're not on hillsides, so you don't see them unless somebody flying overhead reports them. And Tennessee, this is similar in many ways to a very outstanding pattern in England, 1991, a place called Barbary Castle. It's a little bit more simplified, but nice. And last summer, in Gray, Tennessee, this pattern happened, very nicely made. And here somebody has done some geometry work on that pattern. And this one is controversial. Chualar near Salinas, Washington, December 31st or December 30th, 2013, but most people became aware of it in 2014. There was a company, a technology company, NVIDIA technology company, and they made a new computer chip for mobile devices, so mobile devices could have video on them. And they were just about to unveil this at a big electronic convention, and then this crop circle appeared. Well, it's controversial because the reporting was that they paid, the CEO of NVIDIA paid his marketing team to do something really unique to draw attention to their computer chip, which looked just like this. And, and so the story that went out was that they hired some crop circle maker men from England to come over and make this crop circle to replicate the computer chip. So it was widely publicized that this was definitely man-made. However, I love the howevers, the exceptions. A very good friend of mine who goes to England nearly every summer and is a crop circle researcher, knows a tremendous amount about it, has been in hundreds of crop circles as well as I, often together with me. And she and a couple of friends went up to Northern California to visit this from Southern California, and they sat in the crop circle. It had already been harvested. So they were allowed to go in. And they found that there were a lot of the bent and not broken stalks. So that's a good sign right there that this could be genuine. And as they were sitting there, late afternoon, she and her two friends, meditating in the crop circle, even though it had been harvested, and it was getting darker, and because this was winter, and it was getting very, very cold, kind of damp and cold. But as they were meditating, for probably 20 minutes or so, each of them later said that they suddenly felt a tremendous warmth around them, warming them up for the rest of their meditation. Now, that would not happen in a man-made crop circle. And also, they found, even though the harvesting had happened, but the laid down parts are still laid down, even with the harvesting, that they felt a lot of energy in that crop circle that they didn't feel outside. So maybe it's a hoax that was a hoax. Maybe not. It's very difficult to say. Here are some more details of that. In any case, it's a very precise, exacting crop circle. That's actually a photograph of that chip. Now in Oregon, 1990, an amazing thing happened. This Sri Yantra, Tibetan, very sacred symbol, was carved into the desert floor, no grasses, no plants whatsoever. And each length was 3 miles long. And it was discovered by some National Guard young fellows who were being trained as pilots for the National Guard, and they from Idaho, and they went over this territory. Wow, what's that? It probably would never have been discovered if it hadn't been for these fellows flying over. And then they went, within a day or two, hired a Jeep and went out into the crop circle. And they said that they explored all around, except for their own tire tracks. There were no tire tracks or footprints around, and that each line, each section had been carved about a foot or so into the soil. And where it was carved in, there was no soil left on the outside. In other words, usually if you would dig in the earth, there's a little pileup of the earth that you've dug, but there wasn't anything like that. And so we'd have no idea how long that was there. But that's just part of the mystery of this wonderful phenomenon. This one was in Southern California. It was a heart shape. And on this opposite hill, it's hard to see from the photo, but there was another heart shape facing that one. And this was not really a crop. It was just a field of very curvy, unruly, wild mustard plants. I actually went to that one. It was very interesting. And then more in Northern California, Santa Rosa County, was this simplified Barbary Castle type of formation. In 1996, in Laguna Canyon, that's Southern California, they had built a new toll road. And to build the toll road over the road that goes into Laguna Beach from the major freeway there, they had built a steep hillside. And to retain the hillside so that the toll road would be okay on the top of it, they planted English heather plants. They're very short plants, and they don't look like wheat or any crop like that. They have lots of little leaves and little purple blossoms on them. Well, the night that these three were made on that same hillside, some residents who live up in the hills in the Laguna Beach area actually witnessed some red balls of light flying over that area. And then these crop circles appeared. So here's a photo of it. the toll road and some of the equipment because it was just being built, and the steep hillside, and it's very, very difficult to see the patterns. That's why I showed you a diagram of it. Okay, then at Chehalis, Washington, we had this nice long pictogram with some interesting features in the middle. And Ohio has more crop circles than any state in the US so far. And Ohio, or this particular part of Ohio, has a lot of very ancient mounds, like the Serpent Mound and other mounds. And I don't think anybody knows who the people were who originally built those mounds, because they were so very long ago. Even the Native Americans say that they have no idea who before them built these mounds. So it has a lot of energy apparently in that area. And they have a lot of soy crops too, and the small crops rather than grain crops. And so this is one of those with an interesting pattern. There's a man named Jeffrey Wilson in the US who sort of made himself the expert on US crop circles, and he lives in the Midwest. And near Fresno, this is a very nice, precise crop circle. And Teton, Idaho, this man had all kinds of orbs around him in that crop circle. But that's a very nice pattern and nice detail of how that was laid down. In Wilbur, Washington, Peter Davenport told me a couple of days here that he went to that crop circle. He lives not too far away. This was a bit north of Wilbur, Washington, and he took photos of it. This might be one of his photos, and it's very nice. There's a triangle in the middle, and then these beautifully laid circles. It looks like a beautifully, gorgeously made crop circles, and I believe he even went into it and said it certainly had the earmarks of a genuine crop circle. And another one in Solano County. And you can see that in the US, often it's right at the edge of a town. They're not big fields way out in the wilderness. Another one in Solano County. And that's interesting that there is this whole feature, and almost as if stepping stones laid down in the crop toward these high tension wires. So what are we trying to understand there about that? Another one in Monterey County. This is very nice. Now you see an example here of this roughly laid down area. This is called lodging or wind damage. And then we go to Canada. Canada has had quite a number of crop circles, particularly across their border with northern United States, and some very, very nice ones. Now we're going over to Bosnia, and in this particular place, a very large round stone was discovered, and here, whoops, oh gosh, I'm sorry, these things really, okay, and there again we see that pattern, the triangle with the circles at the corner. That was a nice crop circle in Bosnia. France has had quite a number of crop circles as well, not as many as Germany and Holland, but that's a gorgeous one, has that nice shine. And this is very, very different in France. And again, quite a nice variety of patterns. This is the canola pattern again. More and more. I'm going to have to go quickly here. France, this is very complex. This one, all these different rings, done beautifully. Here we've got a little misty anomaly of some sort. And again, variety of patterns, different crops. And Russia. Russia has had more crop circles, but it's been very difficult for me to find photos of them that I could use, but here's at least a couple of examples of crop circles in Russia and Ukraine, Slovenia, Switzerland. Very much like, reminds us of some of these spirals that have been seen. Here's a spiral that was seen over Japan, and this one over Australia. And many of you have seen the photo of the one over Norway just several years ago. Switzerland has crop circles. That's very different, beautiful. All the little objects here are people, so you get a sense of the size. Switzerland, very thin lines, so we have a diagram of it to show it even better. And this one's made in grass in what looks like a park area. It looks like a labyrinth, or perhaps a maze, very precisely done. Puerto Rico, this is not exactly a crop, it's a rock promontory with kind of mossy grass having grown over it. A very complex series of circles, rings, and that's the area, southwest corner of Puerto Rico, that has lots of UFO sightings coming in and out of the ocean, in and out of lakes. And lo and behold, there is that crop circle. So Japan, I would love to have more pictures of these other countries. Look at that one in Austria. The Germans, the Austrians, the Swiss seem to be receiving very precise crop circles. And another one in Austria. And Belgium. I'm just giving you a scattering, isn't that lovely? Scattering of crop circles in many different countries, because it is a worldwide effect, just like the extraterrestrial encounters are a worldwide phenomenon. We hear more about that as time goes on. This is very lovely. And Belgium, sorry we don't have an aerial of it, but this was like a Chinese mandala, the yin-yang symbol. And Poland has some crop circles, very nice. Another one. Poland, a cross symbol. Czech Republic, they started having patterns that I was aware of back in 1991 and have continued to have them, many different types. And Sweden, now here's a very nice, simplified, but nice pattern or flower of life pattern. Sweden has had other patterns too, and Brazil has had several that I know of. That's got some complexities. And where we see something like that, that is probably a foot track. Somebody took a shortcut across the field. We just do not like it when people do that, because it messes up the pattern, particularly for the aerial photos. There's another one in Brazil, and that's very precise. Very, very nice spiral formation. And here's at ground level in one. Canada, another one, very recently, 2014. Australia has had crop circles. They certainly have UFO landing spots too, but those are distinguished from the Australian crop circles. And New Zealand, this is very much like one in the year 2000 in England, Wiltshire County, but it's its own design. And here's another one up here in the same field you can see part of. And Spain, look at the precision of that and the square corners, the beautiful standing square lines. And here's another view of it, more clear. That obviously means something, I would think, and I don't know which. Mexico. Of course, Mexico is so huge, and it has a variety of crop circles. China. And China has had a lot of crop circles that I heard of in the 1990s. And they also had, in the desert, carvings right in the desert earth, like we had in Oregon, different patterns. And here's another one. This is very much like a complex crop circle pattern that had mathematical formulas in England just a few years ago, but this was carved into the desert. And this one too, even though the land looks very, very uneven there. And South Korea, we're just about finished. South Korea, I'm showing the diagram first because it shows it much more clearly, and this might be the double helix DNA, possibly, or maybe something else. And then there is that gorgeous pattern in South Korea a few years ago. And that is it, and thank you very, very much.